where we'll be basing our trip on, with our main focus being history, but also linking in other subjects.
We'll be linking in core subjects and foundation subjects where applicable.
And our subsidiary will be geography. So come and join us on our trip into history.
So beginning our risk assessment, we are going to ensure that the children come in a line, holding hands in pairs, because behind me is a public park and we don't want to get the children lost.
To get the children here, we'll be using a coach. The coach is going to park directly outside the museum, so there'll be no need to take the train or make any unnecessary travel. To bring the children in, we will make sure they are wearing high-vis jackets, as it is a public attraction. We don't want any children getting lost,
And then we will take them
to the west entrance where school groups can enter the attraction.
The museum recommends that we have a ratio of 1 to 15 children per adult, and we think that that's a little bit too big a group, so we would go for 1 to 6 or 1 to 5. The children will be Key Stage 2 because it's quite a difficult topic for younger children to relate to, and we would also recommend that the children wear wristbands that have the school's name and contact details on it.
Okay, so this is the entrance where the school would come in, but before we go in, we make sure that we do a head count to make sure that we've got all the children.
Prior to this, we have discussed noticeable risks in the external environment and are going to discuss our risk assessment in more detail, using our own knowledge and guidance from the museum.
Owen and Ryan 2001 highlight that when assessing the risk of a situation, it is important to consider the likelihood as well as severity and to take steps to minimise the risks to the children.
Hence, in our plan, we have calculated all possible risks and rated them for both likelihood and severity by stating whether they are low, medium or high risk, and have detailed our actions to reduce these.
The possibility of a lost child is fairly high, and so we have planned the appropriate precautions. These include regular head counts and an organised designated meeting point. Adults should also have mobile phones and appropriate contact details. This is also relevant if first aid is required.
Another hazard we must consider is the possibility of a fire or evacuation. Adults must be made aware of all fire exits and our chosen assembly points. It is also essential to carry out a register and report anyone missing to a member of staff. In the unlikely possibility of an extreme evacuation, we will follow the museum's protocol.
We plan to use a coach to travel to the museum, and so must consider associated risks. Children should be briefed on how to carefully get on and off the coach, and should be seatbelted throughout. Adults should be spread equally throughout, and should stand at the side of the road when the children are lining up. If the coach breaks down, adults should keep children calm and maintain good communication with the coach driver. If the coach were to cancel on the day, we may have to reschedule the trip, as in our opinion, we would like more adults if we were to use public transport into London during rush hour.
If a child or adult becomes ill on the trip, appropriate measures should be in place. Sick bags and a first aid kit will stay with a designated first aider, and if adults are unable to stay with their group due to their own illness or a child's, then their group should be split equally. It may be necessary to travel back to school, and so adults should ring ahead. Also, all adults should be aware of allergies or medical conditions amongst the children, and necessary equipment will be available.
There are many staircases in the museum, and this may be a tripping hazard. Similarly, outside there is uneven ground, and so children should be reminded to walk carefully throughout. Prior to the trip, children should be told to bring appropriate footwear. This could be trainers, as we feel especially girls' footwear can be quite slippery.
Another low risk to children is the weather. They should be reminded to either bring sun cream or to be cautious of slippery ground after rain.
Finally, it is important to consider how every child will be included. Prior to the trip, the museum and coach should be checked for appropriate accessibility. Children with special educational needs and disabilities should all have appropriate adult support if required.
We are now going to shift our focus onto our curriculum map. A focus of our visit was the Family in Wartime exhibition. It gives the children the opportunity to learn more about the topic before continuing work about this at school.
There are many artefacts for the children to appreciate, which can stimulate their learning in other areas of the curriculum. This has supported the development of our curriculum map, in which we have suggested many cross-curricular activities. Barnes 2011 supports cross-curricular learning and suggests that they can motivate high-quality learning when appropriately used within the curriculum. Dixon and Hales 2014 proposed that museums offer children the opportunity to interact with the artefacts and other resources they may hold.
For example, we found a trench in the museum which is beneficial for the children.
They can sit in there and experience what it was like for a family in wartime.
This is our curriculum map, which has been planned based on the children visiting the museum at the beginning of the topic. Our main focus is history, with heavy links into geography. This cross-curricular approach is supported by Catlin 2006, who explains that the two subjects develop children's sense of place. Corbishley 1994 further supports this, explaining that in order to understand the geographical background of a place, references must be made to its history. Prior to the trip, we will do an activity so that the children have a brief understanding of the time period. During our pre-visit, we bought some artefacts that we believe could be used in an activity called evidence bags. Grigg and Hughes 2013 explained that children are presented with artefacts from which they have to determine the owner.
We walked around the museum and we found various artefacts and interactive activities that inspired the ideas for our curriculum map.
We're beginning our tour in a family in wartime. As you can see, we've got an Anderson shelter where children can sit, and we'll be discussing how a family in general lived in war times with things such as rationing and evacuation.
We can link this Anderson shelter to science because we can test what materials would be good to make our own Anderson shelter back at school.
This is reflective of the DT national curriculum, as the children will be able to make their own Anderson shelter that is fit for purpose and for a particular group of people.
Another science element would be the blackout curtains, because you can look at what materials would be suitable to you.
Another element in geography could be discussing on how different the lives were for people who lived in this time. For example, using things like gas lights and coal fireplaces, and how it's so different from how we live today.
The museum displays a map which highlights the effects of the war on the local area. This could be transferred into the classroom, as Rowley and Cooper 2009 supports activities such as investigating locality to see the influence of the invaders and settlers on the landscape.
Rationing. We could use this in literacy, the children could make their own rationing cards, and in maths they could answer questions about how much they would need to save up to make a cake or recipe. This could also be useful for geography, as the children will be able to see why we couldn't import from certain countries at that time.
We will also be basing some of our history on evacuation. We'll be asking children to imagine what it was like for children at their time to be evacuated and moved away from their families. As you see, they have postcards, so we could use this as a link into literacy, where they could write their own postcards from the perception of an evacuated child. Also, if they wanted to, it's £70 for a group of 30 children where they can meet their own evacuee. We also think it would be a really good opportunity, as it is free admission into this. Okay, so the children watch this video. If you put the telephone to your ear, you can hear the narrator. It's giving you instructions for what to do in the wartime. What the children could do then, when they go back to school, they could try and remember and then write the instructions down in an instructional text in English. Okay, so this is a timeline of the family that lived in the house. What we could do with the children is, back in the classroom, they could create their own timeline or their own family tree, just like this, thinking about who would come first, next, etc.
We found RE a particularly difficult topic to plan for, as although there are evident religious links, we would consider it a difficult subject to approach with children in Key Stage 2. Consequently, we decided to focus on the role of chaplains in the army and their commitment to their faith. We believe this is reflective of the local Greenwich syllabus for RE.
To conclude, we have all found this trip thoroughly enjoyable, as we share a mutual interest in the history of World War II, and our learning experiences have inspired us to improve and assimilate our new knowledge from the trip into our own pedagogy. This experience will also be similar to the children's own learning journey.
Theories such as Brunner and Vygotsky, following the constructivist approach, highlight the need to take prior learning into account and to provide pupils with the opportunity to relate new knowledge to what is already known, referenced by Pickford, Garner and Jackson 2013.
Thus, by encouraging independent exploration and inquiry around the museum, children can have an enriched learning experience.